Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and this morning we are visiting with Misty Griffin, author of the newly released book, Tears of the Silence, A True Crime, an American Tragedy, Severe Child Abuse, and Leaving the Amish. Misty, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, we're delighted to have you. This is a heartbreaking story. You currently live in the Southwest United States, where you're working towards your master's degree in nursing. You live with your husband of 8 years, your dog, and 2 cats. You left the Amish a little over 9 years ago and have never regretted it. You're interested in humanitarian work, hiking animals, writing poetry, embracing life, and you believe that the impossible is more attainable than most people think, and that no one should ever agree to be silent about harm that has come to them or someone else. Misty, this is an expose into your life living in the Amish community.
Yes, and before the Amish community.
Okay. Talk to me about before the Amish community and how you became a part of it.
Well, I guess my story is a little bit different than the average story, but I wasn't born Amish. And the first half of my book is really about child abuse and what people can learn to see the signs of child abuse and how bad it can be. I mean, so I was born into, I guess, a very dysfunctional American family. My father is actually my mother's stepfather, and my grandmother and my mother both married the same guy. So it was a very dysfunctional family full of drugs, alcohol, domestic violence. And my mother, she had 3 children with her stepfather, and then they divorced. And when I was about almost 4 years old, my mother met this guy that was much older than her. He was in his 40s, late 40s. She was in her early 20s. And he was a miner in northern Arizona. And so she came and got us from where we were living with our father, and we moved with this guy that became my stepdad, and he was very antisocial, wanted to keep us away from the rest of everybody. I mean, we were dressing normally at this time, and they were extremely, extremely abusive. I mean, terribly abusive. I had my ribs broken when I was 4 because they were trying to beat the devil out of me. That's how abusive they were. And so when I was very young, somewhere around 6 or 7 or 8, somewhere around that time, my stepfather got the idea that we should start dressing Amish so we could, they told us, so we could, be following God and everything. Now that I'm older, I think it was partly a way to hide from authorities, actually. But anyways, we started dressing Amish. He ordered Amish clothes from an Amish magazine, very liberal Amish magazine, but they were Amish clothes. And so we just started dressing that way. And when I was 11 years old, we moved to northern Washington, and they found a piece of property that was 6 miles out of town, a town of about 1,100 people. And that we started to live there. So we were almost completely 100% isolated at this time. And my sister and I were basically slaves there. We had to get up every morning at 4:30. We had to do, every task on time. We had time limits for everything. We were probably beaten 3 to 6 times a day each. So this very, very abusive behavior continued until I was about 18 years old. My stepfather was also sexually abusive, so it was just very abusive. And my sister and I wondered if we would ever get out of there alive, because they never talked to us, what would happen after we turned 18, what would happen after we became of age. They told us they just would own us until we were 40s or 50s. We just belonged to them. And we also had my mother's sister living with us and my stepfather's mother. She lived with us, and they were beating them also, starving them, just horrible situations. So when I was 18 and a half years old, my sister and I had been talking that, if one of us didn't stand up to them, we would never get off that mountain. And we were so brainwashed, we had no idea about, asking people for help. We thought we had to dress Amish in order to go to heaven. So when I was 18 and a half, my stepfather tried to beat me, and I ran away from him. He tried to break my neck, but I got away, and I tried to run off the mountain, and I didn't make it. They brought me back to the farm. But I guess they finally realized that one day I might run away when they weren't watching and make it into town. And my goal was to go to the police station. I mean, that's the only thing I knew of that might be able to help me. So it was after that, my stepfather said that he had been in touch with this Amish bishop, and there was this Amish community that was, I can't say where it was, but the people were from the Midwest. So they were going to take us to this Amish community, and basically to keep us from going to the police. So it was about 6 months later that I went to live in the Amish community. We went to visit over the summer several times, and they said that they would adopt each of us and give us like a year trial period to see if, if we didn't obey the rules or anything, then we'd be sent back. So it was actually the week after 9/11 that I went to live in the community, and I was adopted by someone in the community that lived next to the bishop, and I started learning all the Amish rules and learning German. It took me about 9 months to speak German fluently, or Pennsylvania Dutch, what the Amish speak. And then at that time, I was very worried about my sister. I thought she might never be, brought to the community, because my mom and my stepdad's ultimate goal was for me to fail and be sent back. That was their whole idea. They never expected us to make it there. But I did, and I was speaking Pennsylvania Dutch fluently, and I ended up telling one of the people in the community, a little bit about what had happened at home. And finally my sister was brought to the Amish community about 9 months later, and we became Amish.
So leading up to this, you were not a part of an Amish community, but there was an identity, and that cover was to keep you from really being so different that people wouldn't ask questions or bother you or really understand. But when you entered into the Amish community, of which they're all over the country, and you began to adopt the principles of modesty in attire and submission and the whole no automation, all of the ways of what I grew up around. I'm from Pennsylvania, so I grew up around all of that. Did you find that it was more cultish than you had thought? Did you find that it was more of a control mechanism, or was it truly a faith belief system that was established as minimalistic, less distractive, more biblically centric in how you lived your life simply? Or did you find it that it had already become corrupted with greed, with sexual sin, and with this becoming a cult as opposed to a true religious expression?
Definitely a cult, on the cult side. So when I had been raised, we had been raised to basically be Amish. Like, we lived without electricity. The only thing we had that Amish don't have was a car. So when I went to the Amish, I kind of expected, I was kind of used to living the Amish way. But when I went to the Amish, I realized that we as outsiders had been trying to mimic the Amish, but we had not been doing it very well. On the outside, people would think that we were Amish, but when I went to the community, I realized that there is a rule for every single aspect of your life. Like, there is not an aspect of your life that there is not a strict rule that if you do not obey that rule, you will be shunned. So that was a shock for me. Like, there is a rule for the length of your dress, the width of the hem on your dress, your underwear, your house, your buggy. I mean, there is just literally a rule for everything. So I was a little bit surprised by that. And, I started questioning, why is this rule? Why is that rule? And, I was told, that's how it's written in the Ordnung, our church Ordnung, which is their list of church rules. And that kind of put me off a little bit. So then I realized that there's also, oh, I'm so sorry, it's the policeman, or the postman. There's also a lot of rules regarding going to the police, a lot of unspoken rules. So if somebody commits a crime, which there is a lot of sexual abuse and animal abuse and child abuse among the Amish. But if somebody commits a crime, nobody goes to the outside authorities. They go to the church elders. Mm-hmm. And the church elders take it under consideration. Is it really as bad as this person is saying it is? And if they find it to be an offense, then the person is shunned for 2 to 6 weeks, which basically means that they can't sit with church members during church. They can't eat at social events. They can't eat with any church member, at the same table. They're basically put aside for the length of their shunning, which is usually 2 to 6 weeks. And the shunning discipline applies to all crimes, like every crime. There is not a greater punishment than shunning. So it wasn't very long. I was only in the community about 3 months when I started learning of the sexual abuse, and that if an Amish man or boy or somebody commits a sexual crime like rape, they're only shunned for about 6 weeks. So for a crime that offensive, that is barely a punishment. And if the victim is a child, then they are left in the house with the father or the brother or whoever assaulted them, basically. So it's not a very fitting punishment for the crime. And that's why it just continues, unfortunately.
How many Amish are there, based on estimates, living that lifestyle around the United States?
I think the latest, I don't know how they calculate it, but I think it's estimated to be about 100,000.
So 100,000 people living in a system that has its own justice system,
yes,
own rules and regulations, and are truly a people set apart.
Oh yes, they don't consider themselves citizens of the United States.
What repercussions have there been on you for this expose on the abuse of the Amish community?
Not really a whole lot. I mean, there are some people, I don't know if they're truthful or not, but there have been some reviews on my book, and I have gotten a few emails from people saying that they are ex-Amish and they never heard of such a thing. But I mean, it's only been like maybe 5 at the most. And I'm not sure that those people were even really telling the truth, because there seems, these people that live around the Amish, they seem very protective of them. And if somebody comes out and talks against them, they will like go against that person. I'm not sure where that came from, really. It wasn't until after World War II, until maybe the 50s, that the Amish were even liked. I guess by that time, maybe they were more different than the rest of society. But at the beginning, Amish were not a liked people at all, Amish and Mennonites. Mainly because they refused to go to war. And during like the late 1800s, early 1900s, you know, we had the Civil War, the World War I, World War II. They were really not liked at all because of that.
We find most references to the Mennonites and Amish in Pennsylvania and Ohio. That seems to be the largest concentration, but your experience was in the Southwest and the Northwest.
Yes.
How prevalent was it in those areas?
To find Amish, or?
Yeah, how prevalent were the communities? Were there?
Well, the communities I was with were from the Midwest. There are a lot of Amish in the Midwest, in Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Missouri. Probably a lot of communities that started within the last 30 to 20 years, because the land is so expensive in Pennsylvania, Ohio. You know, if they want to buy farmland, it's going to be very expensive.
Right.
So they a lot of them moved to Cashton, Wisconsin, around La Crosse, around Des Moines, Iowa, Missouri, Minnesota, because there was more land available.
Have the authorities been notified? Has the media been notified? Are there investigations going on? We've done exposés here on the Boy Scouts. We've done exposés here on fundamental Mormonism and polygamy. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, because we gave airtime to make people aware of this. Are there ongoing investigations into some of these claims coming out of your testimony? Have you been called to testify and to speak out about this issue?
So I didn't testify, but a year and a half ago, I got this email, and before I left the Amish, I was sexually assaulted by the bishop of my church, and I went to the police. But the police really drug their feet about it. I went to the police because I was afraid that he was also molesting his daughters. So I went to the police, and they kept telling me, we need more evidence. We just can't go out and arrest somebody on evidence. And sometimes you don't have a lot of evidence, but it is a very serious situation. So they didn't arrest him in time, and he ran to Canada with his family. That was 12 years ago. And about a year and a half ago, I got a message from his daughter, his oldest daughter. And she told me that, I think it was 6 months earlier, or somewhere around that they had finally turned him into the police. They'd come back to the United States, and they'd asked, the three oldest daughters asked a neighbor lady, a friend, for help, because the father had been molesting them this whole time, even while I was in the community. So there was 11 children by that time, and he had molested almost all of them, including the boys. So this neighbor lady, she called Child Protective Services, and then they called the police because they realized it was a really serious situation. And oddly, or coincidentally, or by God, I don't know which one, but, well, of course, by God, of course, but the detective that was called in on the case, he was reading my book at the time. And he told the social worker, he said, I think that this book is about this bishop we're investigating. And so the social worker gave my book to the oldest daughter, and she said, does this story look familiar? And, the oldest daughter, she recognized me right away because I'd lived with them for quite a while. And she's like, oh, yeah, that's Emma, my Amish name.
Right.
And so they contacted me, and I told the social worker what had happened and everything. And the bishop was sent to prison for 10 years after that.
the mainstream media, I find little or nothing in regards to this. There are perceptions, of course, that Amish are peaceful, set in their ways, a closed community, self-supporting, don't want outside interference or help. And in today's society, because of what we know of the polygamists, because we know of cult leaders, because we know that often there are red flags, we don't hear a lot of people coming out of the Amish with a story such as yours.
Yes.
Is it out of fear? Is it out of retribution? Or is it why, help me understand why we're not hearing more about such occurrences?
So one thing that I find rather odd is there are stories, but they don't gain traction. There are several stories. There's Mary Byler from Wisconsin, who lived just a couple communities away from my sister. She was raped over 100 times by her brothers, and they actually went to jail. She wore a wire to get them convicted. There's the guy in, I believe it was Missouri, that poisoned his wife. That was a story like a year ago. Just recently, I think in Adams County, Ohio, about a month ago, there were 2 Amish men that were arrested for child molestation. But these stories do not get any traction. There are many more stories, but they just don't, people don't see them, it seems like. They don't want to accept it or see it or listen to it, because they have this picture in their head that the Amish are like pure and holy and the ultimate epitome of Christianity, it seems like. But they really have no idea what the Amish church foundation is or what they believe. And ultimately, in the Amish church, it is not morals or being a good person that they believe will get you to heaven. They believe following the Ordnung and the customs handed down by the forefathers, that is what is going to take you to heaven. As far as morals, they are not really taught among the Amish. It's follow the Ordnung. That is what is taught. That's why there is so much child abuse, animal cruelty, sexual abuse, domestic violence. I mean, that is all in the Amish. And I think it's because morals, are lacking.
We're talking with Misty Griffin, author of Tears of the Silenced, A True Crime and an American Tragedy, Severe Child Abuse and Leaving the Amish. I'm fascinated by this because we do have this perception of this modesty, of this closed community that seems to be a throwback to the 1800s when there were barn raisings and there were community efforts and there was no reason to look. They were people who wanted to be left alone. They were polite in the community but not engaging, and they just wanted to be left alone, so people left them alone. Maybe the time has come for us to stop leaving them alone and examining this just a little bit closer. We're going to take a short break and we'll return, and we're going to continue to talk with Misty about what it is she experienced, why she wrote the book, who she has been able to reach with this book, and what the outcome we hope to obtain by exposing this child abuse, sexual abuse, animal abuse within the Amish community. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're visiting with Misty Griffin, author of Tears of the Silenced, A True Crime and an American Tragedy, Severe Child Abuse, and Leaving the Amish. You know, we are not an investigative reporting television network. We are a biblically Christian worldview, and when subjects such as the coverage we gave to the sexual abuse going on within the Boy Scouts, when we covered the story of the polygamous daughter and fundamental Mormonism, we did it not for the purpose of saying that we have evidence or that we are the Geraldo Riveras or that we have done investigative reporting, but there are voices out there that are not being heard, who have a story to tell from firsthand experience, who love the Lord, and who have come out the other side of it because of the grace of God. And we're talking with Misty Griffin, and we haven't yet really talked about the fact that it was her faith in the true God, in the one true God, in the belief in Jesus, that was what gave her the strength to leave, to walk away, and then the strength and the wherewithal to write an extraordinary book which chronicles abuse after abuse after abuse, story after story after story. And we will tell you that we are here to interview and to talk to Misty. We have not done any verification or investigative reporting. That's not who we are. But as those who are steeped in the Bible know that secret organizations, places who cut themselves off from access, who do not allow the light to penetrate into every corner, that give the appearance of hiding something, usually are representative of something that is not truly of God. We find that in secret organizations where you swear oaths to keep secrets. You see that as problematic from a true scriptural perspective. Jesus says, make no oath to man. And this is a society that is not understood. We have steered clear of the Mennonite and Amish communities out of quote-unquote respect for tradition, respect for individuality. But if there are credible stories coming out of testimony and convictions of individuals under the covering of what we believe is a branch of Christianity, but what I'm hearing right now is it is not biblically, scripturally based on the gospel message and the teachings of Jesus. It is based upon a set of rules and regulations, no different than in some congregation, the book of discipline or the rules and regulations of which you abide by, which takes precedence over the Bible itself. Was it your experience in your time in the Amish community that you studied the Bible?
No. Studying the Bible is pretty much almost forbidden in the Amish. In my experience, to learn German, I used an English Bible and a German Bible, like side by side, to like learn how to read German, how to get the idea of it. And I actually learned some what they call High German. The Amish speak Pennsylvania Dutch, and what I realized was that most Amish do not understand High German, and that's what all of the sermons are in. The bishop and the minister and the deacons, they rattle off like passages of the Bible in High German, and the congregation basically have no idea what they're saying, because they learn how to read High German in school, but they stop school at like 13 or 14 years old. So by the time they are adults, when they would want to listen, teenagers don't really pay attention, but when they are adults and would want to listen, they basically have forgotten what they learned in school. So they don't understand it, but they can read it, because we have to read it every church service to read the old hymns that we sing in German. But they basically don't understand anything. And reading an English Bible is a big no-no. There have been Amish that have been shunned for having Bible studies and reading English Bibles. I think it was in Pennsylvania, there was a group that was shunned for having Bible studies. It is considered worldly. Learning Bible verses, reading the Bible is considered worldly.
You know, how fascinating. I don't think that I would have ever not considered Amish or Mennonite to be a branch or denomination of Christianity, but from what you're telling me, you would not include them in that classification.
No. Probably in order to understand that, probably learning a little bit of the history of how it happened would be a good idea. Like when Menno Simmons started the Mennonites, which was the original church, they looked and pretty much acted like everybody else. I mean, they were being persecuted by the Catholics at that time. So if they looked just a slight bit different, they would have been picked up immediately and thrown in prison or burned at the stake. You know, those things they did during the Reformation. But it wasn't until Jacob Ammon, who started the Amish, that they started to look just a tiny bit different. And that was like wearing black socks was his thing, that everybody had to wear black socks. And then around the time of the Civil War, they had like a conference of Amish, because people looked a little bit different by that time, but not a whole lot. And that's when they got the idea that they had to write the Ordnung, because there was like more expensive materials coming out, more expensive clothing, more modern clothing, and they said that, you know, we just can't follow these trends, so we have to set rules for our church to follow. Otherwise, we're just going to lose everybody out into the world, because a lot of the young people wanted to join the railroads, they wanted to go west, all of these things. So they just started the Ordnung, and then they just started adding and adding and adding. And really by probably the 1920s, the 1910 is when, like, you see this Amish that we have today. Very different from their forefathers. And then they just kept adding to the Ordnung and becoming more and more and more restrictive as the world progressed. They just kept pulling back more. And now today you have a people that is just completely 100% different from the world, completely different, but that's not how they started.
It fascinates me because all over central Pennsylvania, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, all over the region surrounding Harrisburg and central Pennsylvania, heavily Amish. I think that more focus came on the Amish when the fireplaces came out that were made by the Amish community. That was really the first time there was a product and an identity, and all of a sudden it was on the pride of craftsmanship made by the hands of the Amish, and it kind of elevated the Amish into people of great discipline and high quality German engineering in an American way. And people bought those heaters that looked like fireplaces. And that's kind of what launched, from a commercial standpoint, really the word Amish to be on the lips of people who may never have said the word before in their life or ever even heard of the Amish. As you look around the web, there was an article that said that there are 5 beliefs that set the Amish apart from other Protestant Christians. One is the nature of salvation. They don't believe that faith automatically guarantees salvation. No. 2, separation from the world. Their separation extends to foregoing electricity, since being tied to the electrical grid would constitute a connection to the outside world, which causes pollution. Most Christians see spreading the word of God as a central responsibility. Amish, on the other hand, feel no obligation to evangelize, preferring to just let their appearance and the way they live be a testimony. And the Amish grant primary authority to the church and reject any civilian authority that contradicts it. So Amish beliefs, for example, forbid acceptance of any public funds.
Mm-hmm.
And then the, excuse me, the word that you're using is Ordnung.
Mm-hmm.
And the Ordnung is an oral tradition of rules and expectations that cover every aspect of Amish life, private, public, and ceremonial. Rather than being written set of rules that must be memorized, it's taught by living it, much like children absorb and learn their native tongue by living it. Living it is a code of conduct that evolved over decades, and it differs slightly from one Amish congregation to another. So, one, there is not an adherence to the biblical gospel.
No. That's considered.
Two, it is man-made, man-driven laws, rules, and regulations.
Yes.
You mentioned the concept of shunning. Explain what that means.
So, in order to be shunned, you have to break basically one of the rules in the Ordnung. And contrary to what that said, there is a list of rules that consist of the Ordnung that is read every communion, which is basically spring and fall. It takes maybe 2 hours sometimes to read it. It is so long. And if you break any of those rules, like, say for instance, a minor rule, like instead of having a 1-inch hem on your sleeve, you put 2 inches. If you did that, you would get a visit from the deacon, and the deacon would tell you, it's been brought to our attention that you have, committed this offense against, our rules, and we need you to change it. And if you don't change it, or if you resist in any way, like I will change it in 2 weeks or whatever, it will be taken to the elders, and they will say that you are not repentant, you have resisted, our authority, and so we're going to place you in the ban, what they call the ban. And they will determine how long that is. Usually it's 2 to 6 weeks, or if it is a clothing issue or drinking alcohol or something, it's 2 to 6 weeks, or until you repent of that sin.
And where are you sent?
You're not sent anywhere. You're just not allowed to sit with church members during church services. You have to sit in a chair off to the side. You're not allowed to stay after church and eat the, after church meal. In your own house, if there are baptized church members, then you have to sit at a small table by yourself. Usually there's always baptized church members in your house, so you just sit at a small table off to the side of the table. Nobody can hand you, or nobody can take anything out of your hand. They can hand you stuff, but you can't hand them anything. You're not allowed to attend any social events other than church, basically, and that's the shunning.
And can people speak to you, or they ignore you?
They pretty much ignore you. You're not allowed to have any unnecessary conversation. If it's about work, you need them to go bale the hay or something, you're allowed to say something like that, but not just conversation. You're not allowed to do that.
And so this is really kind of a mind control, isolation kind of technique that's used to drive conformity.
Yes. It's harder if you're like an unmarried person. If you are in the dating, usually you're baptized between 16 and 17, unless you're in the very liberal communities that have Rumspringa. But in the stricter communities, you're baptized between 16 and 17. And in the Amish, if you don't get married, you're basically a nobody. So you want to find a boyfriend or a girlfriend and get married by at least 20 or 21 usually. So if you are in trouble and you're being placed in the ban and you don't repent, then you can't date, or nobody will date you. So, you have no choice other than to conform. Otherwise, you'll be an outcast pretty much for your whole life.
In the years since the book came out, and you have become publicly speaking about it, and the book has done extremely well, are you hearing from others who have left the Amish and have similar stories to yours?
Yes. There is one girl from a documentary about the Amish that also she wrote me. We're friends now. But she said that she had pretty much the same experience. She was raped when she was 12 years old. I think it was by an uncle. And, she was told to be quiet, to not talk about it. That's what happens with sexual abuse victims. You're basically told that the church will handle it and you should never speak of it. After the person is shunned, they've been retaken into the church. You're just not ever allowed to talk of it again because they've been forgiven. And one thing that I find odd about this practice is that for any other sin that you commit, like drinking alcohol, your dress, your house, your buggy, anything that can be seen by outward people, you won't be taken back into the church until you completely stop what you're doing. But with sexual abuse, because it's something hidden, I guess, they just take people in after their shunning is over, and they have no proof that they stopped. And in many cases, from what I've learned, that they commit these crimes even while they're being shunned, because usually their victims are not church members, and they have complete full access to them at all times. So they're just taken back into the church after 2 to 6 weeks, and then they commit the crime again. And after they've been reported, multiple times, people stop coming forward. The bishop's wife in my community, that happened with her father. He was a deacon in the church, and her mother reported her husband 5 times to church leaders over a period of maybe 10 years or so. And then she said her mom just stopped going to church leaders because it didn't do any good, and her husband was getting angry with her, of course. So she just stopped, and it just continued. I think she had 7 sisters, and her oldest sister, they believe that her first child was her father's. Everybody in the community whispers about it. They believe that it's her father's child.
So, not just sexual abuse, but incest?
Incest is probably the most common form of sexual abuse in the Amish.
And yet this is going on in 2017, and it doesn't seem to be making the headlines. Still remains under wraps, but I do see that several outlets are picking up stories about the Amish, and we hope that our time with you will bring even more focus and attention to this problem. Your story is so moving and so compelling, and it also is filled with stories of others who have gone through the exact same set of circumstances that you have, that it seems that this is quite a common problem in a community that is dodging, ducking, hiding behind a covering of clandestine activities, that saying, well, because we're not plugged into the grid, because we're not a part of the society, you really should have nothing to do with us. Isn't this what Sharia is coming along with in Islam? Saying that we have our own set of rules and regulations. Why don't you deal with your own, we'll deal with our own. And we see the world is in chaos over this concept of bringing a separate set of laws and a separate set of traditions and a separate set of standards for different people in a country that's built on a foundation of one nation, one law, one constitution, one Bill of Rights. It seems that this was a way to get around it and to create a really a monarchy. The bishop is in control of a community, and there can be several different, within the same city, several different gatherings. What would the name? Would they be congregations?
Communities, usually they're called.
Okay. And are they collaborative? Do they work together? Are they competitive? Are they friendly? Do they cover for each other?
within the Amish, you have different levels of liberal. I think the most popular view people have of the Amish are the ones that have the children. When they're 16, they go on Rumspringa. Those are the liberal Amish. That's the highest, the most liberal Amish. And then you have like 4 under that, and each different level, I guess, they don't commune with each other. They don't consider each other Amish. Like the strictest will not commune with the next strictest after them. For me, I came from probably one of the strictest communities. And then there's, a higher, ones that allow more liberal things, more modern things or whatever. Yeah, they're just very different. So the stricter group will commune or associate with Amish that is of their same stricter ordinal. But they will not associate really with the more liberal ones, because they kind of don't consider them Amish. If that makes any sense. It's very confusing to outsiders.
Well, it is confusing. As you find, the more confusing something is, it's because the more distracting it is, the harder it is to pin it down. We've been talking with Misty Griffin, who has become a voice of the Amish lifestyle, which has been a cover-up in some cases, not saying that everybody who's Amish is a child molester. This is not Amishophobia. This is not condemnation. This is an exposing of something that's been hidden in darkness, that you have come out with the story that has been verified and confirmed by others and others' testimonies and others' stories within here in a book entitled Tears of the Silenced, a true crime and an American tragedy, severe child abuse and leaving the Amish. This is a story, it's your story, and it's the story of others who have experienced the exact same thing you did. And I thank you for your voice. I thank you for your strength. I thank you for your calm clarity. I think if I were sitting in your chair right now, retelling the story of 4 broken ribs at age 4, of being molested, raped and abused, and finally being able to break away and find freedom and peace in Messiah, I might be a quivering heap. And I am just incredibly impressed by you and proud of you, and thankful that you shared your story here with us on Revealing the Truth. And this book is available. You can visit ignitinganation.com, click on Books and Media, and click on a book entitled Tears of the Silence, and read this story for yourself and begin to look into what is going on in these worlds that seem to pop up under the cover of darkness. If it seems like they have a lot of secrets, as a Bible believer, that's a red flag for me. And I think it should be a red flag for us all. Misty, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much.
God bless you, and thank you so much. And that brings us to the end of our broadcasting day, of our live broadcast. However, all of our programs from today will be rebroadcast all throughout the day on Facebook and Twitter. You'll find them on our YouTube channel, Igniting a Nation. You can find us on the web at ignitinganation.com. You can subscribe to our monthly newsletter, really bi-weekly newsletter, and see a list of all of our upcoming guests. And we give you a link on the Books and Media page so you can get a copy of your own and read this story for yourself. Misty gives you her email address and tells you how to get a hold of her, and I'm sure that you have as many more questions as I do. But Misty, we wish you great success in this endeavor, and pray a hedge of protection about you, that the people will know the truth and the truth will set them free. So until we see you right back here on the Igniting a Nation Broadcasting Network and this program, Revealing the Truth, live at 9 a.m. Central Daylight Time, Central Standard Time, Central Time, 9 a.m., right here on the Igniting Nation Broadcasting Network. Until we see you here tomorrow, we wish you shalom.